Welcome, Alex and Blanka.
Thank you, Ryan. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alexander Campos on behalf of the Board of Trustees and staff of the Hispanic Society, Museum and Library. Thank you for joining us tonight as we launch a new series titled Seminar with Artists. Thank you, Ryan. Good evening, everyone. We are pleased to announce this new series and continues the legacy of the Hispanic Society's founder, an avid collector of contemporary art of his period, hosting and supporting artists like Joaquin Sorolla, Ignacio Zolega, Michael Velidrich, Ruth Matilda Anderson, Child Hassam, and of course, his wife, Anna Huntington. Archer was an avid collector of contemporary art as well as old masters. In 2020 to 2021, during the height of the COVID crisis, we received a gracious grant from the Vilcek Foundation to support artists research fellowships, in which 10 artists were invited to meet regularly with curators to conduct research on the vast and diverse collection of the Hispanic Society that is related to their own artistic practices and interests. In 2022, 4 of these 10 artists received a grant from the New York State Council on the Arts to create a new body of work, and hence the Seminar with Artists series has now been formed, which allows for public presentations by these artists regarding their new creations formed partially by their research at the Hispanic Society. In addition to tonight's 3 seminars, they will take place on November 17th with Cecile Chung, Skipping Thanksgiving, and December 1st, which is a day without art, in honor of the artists whose contributions to society are missed, and December 8th with Jessica Lagunas, and December 15th with Nicholas de Esteves. Tonight is the first, which with the dynamic artist Blanka Amezkua. Blanka was formerly trained as a painter. Her creative practices greatly influenced and informed by folk art and popular culture, from embroidery, papel, picado to comic books. Collaboration, radically pedagogy, and community building are central to her art practices and projects. Her identity, experiences, and artistic decisions are shaped by the reality that she is an immigrant Mexican-born American artist living in New York City. Blanka, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alex, for that introduction. And thank you to Ryan for making sure that everything goes well behind all of this. And I'm very excited to finally be able to share what I've been working on for the last a year and a half. It actually it began before we found out that we had the NISCA grant, which was such a wonderful way to allow me to expand on the work that I was already working on at the Hispanic Society. So I want to say thank you to everyone that has been involved in my research. I unexpectedly have many people involved in the project now, from architects to scientists to my family, librarians. But I first want to say publicly a huge thank you to Dr. Marcus Burke, who was formerly the senior curator of painting, drawing, and metalwork at the Hispanic Society. I had the pleasure of meeting with Marcus for many months in 2001, and those were very unsettling times still for all of us. I feel that we still were not certain where we were all going to be and what stage, and having the opportunity to be with him and in the Hispanic Society, just looking at different textiles or anything that I wanted to see, and with his guidance was really a gift. And I'm really thankful that I had that opportunity, because Marcus is like a walking encyclopedia. He has knowledge of so much from art history, from in general, in world history. So it was really a treat to be able to share my experience at the Hispanic Society with Marcus. And after Marcus, I had the opportunity to also work with Noemi Espinosa, who is an assistant curator of prints and photographs. And she At one point in time, we could not be at the Hispanic Society because of the circumstances that we're still under. And she was very gracious to photocopy virtually an entire text that I was doing research in. So I'm extremely thankful for both Marcus and Noemi, as well as Vanessa Pintado, who's the assistant curator of manuscripts and rare books, where she also graciously provided a lot of needed information for my research. So what I wanted to start out with was basically to just sort of, I'm going to just take you through what has been my research and how this research came about. So I titled my project "Floral Cure: Pre-Hispanic Medicinal Flowers," because as I was doing work at the Hispanic Society, I encountered a book called The Aztec Herbal. And I will expand on what the Aztec Herbal is, but I first wanted to just tell you how my work actually is influenced by the presence of flowers. So next slide, please. I was invited by a former nun back in 2005 to actually teach in three Jesuit middle schools in New York City. And this was the first time that I was teaching middle school. And also it was a time where I actually was commuting through commuting through 4 different boroughs throughout the week. And as I was going through every single school, I began to carry material that was not as heavy, because I knew I had to carry all the material, within Hunts Point in the Bronx, the Lower East Side, Crown Heights in Brooklyn, and also then eventually coming back to the Bronx and Queens, because I was in between both boroughs. And I realized that as I was working with these materials, eventually those materials actually became my own. They were incorporated in my own practice. So what you are seeing now is an installation that I created at Sugar Hill Children's Museum in the spring of 2022. The piece was titled "We Us, We Enter Our," and it was organized by Charlene Melville. So this is actually the largest floral installation that I've created using these silk flowers that I used to guide my students in creating and to gift their moms during Mother's Day. Next slide, please. And this is another example. This is a very emotional piece for me, because actually this was a biennial that was curated by Katya Grochowski, and she is a Ukrainian Australian artist living in New York. This was the first time that we were able to actually go on site to create an art show and actually be present in the space. So whenever I see this image, I have this memory of that the Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts was gracious enough to allow us to be in the space. And also it was the first time where actually artists could enter, with an appointment, but you could enter the space as well. Next slide, please. And here's just another example of me working with flowers. This is a piece that was, it's called Remembrance with Love. And it's an interactive wall piece where Bronx community members were invited to create a flower for someone they lost during the pandemic. And this was an invitation by the Point. So as I was with Marcus in the Hispanic Society, I was learning a little about what were the influences of Spain in the colonies and vice versa. And there was something called the Manila Galleons. And the term Manila Galleons can also refer to the trade route itself between Acapulco and Manila, which lasted from 1565 to 1815. There were actually almost 250 years of exchanges. So I began to think, what are the things that, that came back and forth, and what were all the influences? Now, being in the Hispanic Society during the time that we were, I think for me, it gave me that space for reflection. I used to walk actually from my house all the way to the Hispanic Society. I live in South Bronx, so I would cross the Madison Bridge, go all the way up to St. Nicholas Avenue, and cross 154th Street, which is actually, I would turn exactly where the Sugar Hill Children's Museum is at, and then I would cross the cemetery and reach the Hispanic Society. But in that trajectory, there was a lot of reflection. And I was learning about everything about the collection in the Hispanic Society, and also of the objects that were exchanged. I came across, because I also do textiles, one of the first pieces that I encountered in the Hispanic Society, and I was able to see up close, was a mantón de Manila. And this beautiful mantón de Manila, which we all saw, all the other artists that are current doing research at the Hispanic, we were just blown away. Just the embroidery, because it's actually double faced. So I do textile work, and I also embroider. So to be able to create an embroidery that has exact replica on both sides, that those stitches are so precise, and to be able to get all the different colors, positioned in the same way, it's very difficult. It's not very easy. But to be able to learn about the mantones de Manila, how they're these beautiful shawls that they're actually originated in Canton, China, in the 16th century, and they were introduced in Spanish trade to the Philippines, the capital of Manila, Spanish colony at the time. And this is actually a manton that is part of the Hispanic Society's collection. I had the pleasure of seeing this beautiful textile revealed by Marcus, and as we as he was shown, of course he knows the piece, and so, but it was the first time for me seeing the work. It just blew my mind, and immediately when I saw those flowers, I thought of Oaxaca, and so I wanted to see. They reminded me so much of the Tehuanas dresses from Oaxaca. They have these beautiful big flowers, and as I'm doing research for the textiles, I recently reached out to Marta Turok, who happens to be a renowned expert in Mexican textiles, and she's also the current curator at the Franz Mayer Museum in Mexico City. She also, in 2006 and 2007, was invited to catalog Frida Kahlos's wardrobe, the one that was guarded in her bathroom for 50 years. So I was asking Marta, do we have any academic record or studies about these specific flowers, where they originated? But in my eyes, I see from the manton that was originated, originally from China, there's a huge connection between these two. So I'm very curious. I will continue to do my research and to see and to find, if there is something out there somewhere that can guide me in the connection of these flowers with China and Oaxaca, which is really fascinating. Next slide, please. And like I said, I'm formally trained as a painter, but I work with different media and different materials and different points of my life. I've moved around a little bit. I'm really an immigrant artist that has not only migrated to the US, but I've also migrated to two other countries. And this is an example of an embroidery series that I did between 2000 and 2010, where I was taking the imagery of women that were depicted in Mexican adult comic books. This was in a way to appropriate the female imagery, and also to portray the female body in a very female context, with embroidery and textile. So I felt like, these women, as they are isolated and taken from that comic book male gaze context, I felt that they're gaining the strength and this force that they don't have while they're being depicted in the comic books. Next slide, please. And as I'm working with different materials, I'm always trying to find the material that will be able to, that will that I can really interpret the ideas that I have at that moment. And in 2018, I decided to go to Mexico to learn how to do papel picado. I was, prior to that decision of going to Mexico, I was already working with a lot of paper and doing a lot of collage. And I was incorporating papel picado, but it wasn't papel picado that I was making. So I wanted to learn how to make the papel, and I wanted to actually dive more into this notion of paper making and this way. So I went to Puebla, Huixcolotla, and I met Don Rene Mendoza. He has been doing this craft, this art form for the last 35 years. His entire family is involved in papel picado making. They taught me everything I needed to know. He taught me everything I needed to know. He actually even everything I needed to know to actually create my own papel picado designs. He also guided me to the person who would create my chisels, because the papel picado traditional form is created using about 30 to 50 tissue paper sheets together. They're stapled. You create a design and you put it on top of your of the papel of the stack, and then you start basically chiseling away in some way. You know, you're using chisels that are very they're very sharp, and you take a hammer, and all of those the chisels will go through all of the layers, of course, because the tissue paper is very thin. Another fact that I love about the papel picado is also that in Mexico we call the paper itself, we call it papel china, which again, it references the place of origin. The tissue paper is originally from China, and it was brought to Mexico during the galleon exchange, even I think a little bit later, I mean, the 1800s. And people were taking this papel picado and just using it in different ways, but it was until maybe the 1960s that in the city of Huixcolotla, Puebla, they began to create these banners, and they're they began to be used as decorations, let's say, for Day of the Dead, and now of course are used for many different festivities, and you can customize them as well. Next slide, please. This is a series I created in collaboration with Don Rene Mendoza in Tribeca, which was titled "My Home Has Wings." In this installation, I created the different city seals, the seals of every city I've lived in the U.S. That's why I called it "My Home Has Wings," because I've lived actually between. I've lived in both coasts. My parents migrated in the 70s to California, and so I grew up in LA, and then I went to school in Fresno, and I lived many years in San Francisco. And then I moved to New York. I've been in New York since 2003. I went to school actually at Buffalo State for 1 year. I did my national student exchange my sophomore year in college at Buff State. So and Buffalo is also incorporated there. So I did, this is, to just represent my movement within the country. I also highlighted and incorporated some of the emblematic buildings in each of the cities that I've lived in, and some of the fruits that were important, especially in California, like cotton and grapes. Next slide, please. This is a recent project that I created here in Mitchell Houses. It was part of an art bridge proposal where titled Bridging the Divide, and it's a series of ongoing artist residencies at NYCHA developments throughout New York City. And my contribution is basically this piece again that is called We Inter R, and it's located here around my neighborhood in Mitchell Houses, where I incorporated, it's a stylized papel picado series where I incorporate different elements that I feel unite the communities that live in South Bronx. So there's, different things that represent the African-American community, the Latino community, even Asian. We don't have that much Asian community, but it is present here as well. Next slide, please. And I was fortunate that during the time I was doing research at the Hispanic Society, Dr. Margaret Connors decided to actually do a beautiful tertulia in speaking about papel picado. So if anybody wants to hear more of the history of papel picado, I highly recommend that you tune in and see, or actually just look for the tertulia that Dr. Margaret gave. It was a really a wonderful presentation and introduction to papel picado, and it highlights a beautiful piece that is part of the collection of the Hispanic Society, which I will show you right now. So I'm thankful for Dr. for including my work there as well. So when I was going through all the archives and the files and seeing what I wanted to see within the collection of the Hispanic Society, this was a piece, of course, that I really wanted to see up close, because it's a paper cut of a view of the Plaza of the Cathedral of Mexico. And as it was in the year of 1796, and this is by Ignacio Lopez Aguado, the papel picado on dark blue satin, mounted on wood, on glass. And this is after a painting by Jose Joaquin Fabregat from 1997. The piece itself is so clearly, this was not done with chisels. It's a very special piece because you can see that I would think that it's more closely related to the type of papel picado that is actually created in China. There's very intricate details. Even the letters are beautifully crafted. So sadly, I still have not seen this piece up close, but this is one of the pieces that eventually, because it was traveling when I was there, and I think it went to another show. When it gets back to, when it's returned to the Hispanic Society, it's definitely a piece I'm definitely going to go and look for. Next slide, please. In 2013, I spent some time in Cuernavaca, in Mexico. I was born in Mexico, and I grew up between California and Cuernavaca. And one of those trips that I took, I actually was inside a Sanborns, and Sanborns are these restaurants that these beautiful locations that that this chain of restaurants decided to take over, and the chain is called Sanborns, and this is one in Cuernavaca. And they have, it's a restaurant, and there's a bookstore, and there's also a shop. But I bumped into these two magazines, and I was very, very, I had never seen this type of iconography of these illustrations. So I picked them up, and it happened to be a special edition for the 20-year anniversary of the magazine. And so I put them in my luggage, and I browsed through them, but I really did not understand what it was really all about. I knew it was a codex, but I just really liked being the painter that I am, the illustrations were just they're very unique. They were not, the typical botanical illustrations that I've seen from the European books. So I took them and I just put them away. Next slide, please. And as I was doing research at the Hispanic Society, I bumped into something called an Aztec herbal. And this time I had a little bit more time to actually go through the book, and I opened the book, and it was precisely the information from those two magazines that I had picked up in 2013 in Cuernavaca. So this was really the extent, more of an extensive explanation of what the codex was all about. And given the times, perhaps having gone through COVID and being more aware of the natural world, I picked up the Aztec herbal, and I really clinged onto the book and to try to really understand what the codex was all about. And as I was going through the book itself, as I was reading the recipes, they're just mind-boggling, because not only is it the first medicinal book created in the Americas, but it's also the book that is entirely created by the knowledge of the Nahuas or the Aztec inhabitants of that location in Mexico, and the art is also created by an indigenous artist. So I had never encountered something that was just so that was so clearly directed as ancestral knowledge, you know, previous to the arrival of the Spanish in Mexico. This is something very specific in the sense of like the knowledge that the doctor has is knowledge that was passed on to him prior to the arrival of the Spanish. So it's a very, very specific herbal book in that it describes the recipes or the remedies for each illness in a way that I had never seen before. And so the book on the right-hand side is the cover of the Aztec Herbal that I found in the Hispanic Society. And the book on the left-hand side is actually the first account of the Codex de la Cruz-Badiano that was written by an American when we found out about the actual codex. So there's the finding of the codex is actually quite interesting, because if it hadn't been for a doctor named Charles U. Clark that was doing research in Europe, and he was looking for early Latin American texts inside the Vatican, he discovered a small book called the Badiano's manuscript, and it then became known as an Aztec Herbal. But this is had it not been for Dr. Charles U. Clark, that inside of the Vatican, you know, God knows the many things that are housed in the Vatican's library, that he brought to our attention in 1932, 33, that there was an herbal house there. We probably would not be discussing the Badiano right now. So I also wanted to describe what Emily Walcott Emmert described, how she described the text, because I feel it's a very small text, and actually the one on the left-hand side, the orange one, the small one, I was able to access at our New York Public Library. The things one access at the New York Public Library if we know what we're looking for. It was a revelation. It's a very small book describing, like I said, the entire understanding of what the Aztec Herbal was. And I would like to just describe what it is and the way Emily is describing it, because she does a beautiful job. I was able to actually photocopy the entire Badiano's manuscript provided by Emily Walcott Emmert, that happens to be in our New York Public Library. So I would like to actually read a little information about that so that you understand the beauty of her writing as she encounters this document for the first time. So she says, the manuscript is a complete herbal consisting of 63 folios, approximately 6 by 8 1/4 inches in size, clearly written in Latin and Aztec. It is divided into 13 chapters, each representing an attempt to group maladies of either similar type or similar location of the body. The text is exquisitely illustrated with pictures of 204 herbs and trees, and these illustrations still today retain their brilliancy of color. I'm not sure why she says 204, but everybody agrees that it's 185 illustrations that are actually in the herbal. The herbal book is the work of 2 Aztecs who were educated at the College of Santa Cruz. There seems little doubt that the principal author of the manuscript is one of Martín de la Cruz. The second author is Juan Badianos, the translator. Both of these men were natives taught in the first college erected for the Indians, the College of Santa Cruz in Tlatelolco. The manuscript is fittingly dedicated to Don Francisco de Mendoza, son of Don Antonio de Mendoza, the first viceroy to New Spain. The herbal was written at the request of Don Francisco de Mendoza and was intended as a gift to His Holy Caesarean Royal Catholic Majesty, Charles V. It is evident that Don Francisco, who followed in his famous father's footsteps in fostering the protection and education of the Indians, wished to commend the work of the Indians and to enlist His Majesty's support of the College of Santa Cruz. Entirely apart from wishing to enlist His Majesty's support of the college, which after the early prosperous period was always in need of funds, Don Francisco undoubtedly had a keen interest in the herbs and the medical knowledge of New Spain. Besides the personal interest of Don Francisco in herbs and his desires to foster the education of the Indians, a third and more forceful influence, namely the demand on the part of the Europeans for more herbs and medicaments. The historian Juan de Torquemada, who was for a time a member of the faculty of Santa Cruz, tells us that Moctezuma kept a garden of medicinal herbs and that the court physicians experimented with them and attended the nobility. But the common people came rarely to these doctors for medical aid, not only because a fee was charged for their services, but also because the medicinal value of these herbs was common knowledge, and they could concoct remedies from their own gardens. Next slide. Next slide, please. So in trying to understand what the knowledge and the beauty of the book itself for what it is, because it is a beautiful book. I have been, since I discovered the existence of the Codex de la Cruz-Badiano, I've been trying to actually get close to it. And I actually, one of the things that I really want to see is if I can actually, get to feel it and see it up close. So in 2021, I found out that there was actually a facsimile that was produced in the summer of 2020. And as I'm doing the research, trying to understand where the codex currently is, because the codex was returned to Mexico in 1990 by Pope John Paul II. And it's currently now housed, and it's part of the collection of the Biblioteca de Instituto Nacional de Antropología, Historia de México. And I've been trying to just get close to the codex. So in 2020, in 2021, actually, I find out that the codex is in Mexico, and with the help of with Alex Campos, we wrote a letter to the director of the library asking him if we could please have access to the codex. And to our surprise, he actually answered immediately. And he said, well, it's a little difficult right now. You caught the codex actually out of the vault. And, and he immediately said that you can see the codex, but not in its entirety, but you can see one page. And when he said that, I immediately went down to Mexico and was able to catch the codex. And just, it was, as you see in the image in the photograph, I was able to, this is the closest I've been to actually seeing the real codex. And I stayed in front of it for about 30 minutes because the colors, because the book has not been exposed, to sunlight or to the elements. It really retains the strength of those minerals that were used to create those colors. So that's the closest I've been to actually seeing the real codex. Next slide, please. And speaking with with the director of the library in Mexico. I said, I know that there was a facsimile that was created. There's 600 copies. Would there be a way for me to actually get a copy? And in my mind, I thought there was no way. There's no way I can have a codex. There's no way I would be able to even afford it. I don't know how much these things cost, but I was quite lucky that I was referred to the right librarian through the director, and I actually at this point I do own my own facsimile of the codex, which is a beautiful, beautiful book that is the exact copy of the codex. And this has actually allowed me to take better photographs of the images and of the plants as I work with them and as I continue to develop them. So I feel quite content, but I still want to actually see the real one. Next slide, please. And as I'm doing research, and as I of course want to get closer and closer to the creation of the codex and to understand more what the codex is all about, I really wanted to go to the area where the codex was created. And it's in a place that is very significant for many reasons. This area where the codex was created is now called La Plaza de las Tres Culturas. And many things have taken place in there. If you do a little research, 1968 is very symbolic for that location specifically. Very symbolic in a sad way. Students were massacred in this location. So the location has, even as you are around the space, you can see, and it's called Plaza de las Tres Culturas because you can see the architectural influences of three different cultures. You know, you see the Spanish architecture with the indigenous, and then the very contemporary. Thanks to the NISCA grant, I actually was able to go to the location last week. Next slide, please. And this is what Tlatelolco and the place where this was created looks like now. We don't know for sure if the building itself is not the building where the codex was created, but it is a library. Unfortunately, because I was there during the holiday, I was not able to go into the building and get more information. But I was in the location where the codex was created, and that was very exciting. And as I continue developing the work during the winter time, I actually was I had a residency at Wave Hill, and what I did at Wave Hill was actually start to open up what the codex was all about. And I went through every single page. I wrote down all the names. The names of the plants in the codex are written in Nahuatl, but the text and the remedies, the recipes are all in Latin, because that was the language that was widely used at the time in Europe. And I was trying to actually see, because my proposal was to try to see if I could find any of the plants mentioned in the herb garden in Wave Hill. And I was able to find one. And that is the Datura inoxia. That is also called toloache in Spanish. And it is actually a very toxic plant depending on the dosage. But luckily I was able to find that specific one during my residency, and I was very happy. Next slide, please. And as I was doing the residency, as I was there as a resident artist, I was as the director and Gabriel noticed and Eileen that I was working with papel picado. They were going to have their first gala, because of course they did not have a gala, in 2020 and 2021. But and they asked me if I would be interested in creating the decorations for the gala in Armour Hall, and I was very, very flattered. And so I decided to actually create papel picado that was based on the shapes and forms found in the herbs in Wayfield Garden. And this has been actually the largest installation I've created. I then also created mini papel picado. The idea was to have a workshop and invite the community to come and learn about this traditional technique. Unfortunately, due to weather, and it was in the winter time, we had to cancel the workshop, but the papel picado, the mini papel picado samples were created. So these were also installed in Wayfield in my studio. Next slide, please. And as I continued developing work in Wayfield, I began to, because my attempt with the herbal is really, right now I'm working with the illustrations. It's a very slow process for me because I'm really trying to understand the shapes that they worked with. Like I said, because it's a very different herbal than the European herbals. This feels like the designs are much more immediate. Even if they're stylized, I feel that, you know, there's not much depth, perhaps in some of the images. There's a sense of immediacy in the drawings, but the colors are very vivid and they're just really very, very strong. And I'm trying to understand, you know, I'm still not at that point where I want to see what was used for each color, because actually there's a beautiful work by another anthropologist that she has worked extensively in understanding the colors that were used in the Florentine Codex, which was a little bit around the same time that this codex was created. So I think that after I'm done working with the imagery and the illustrations, I'm going to dive into the understanding of the colors. And so I'm going through very different phases, because I know that once I understand the colors, and I'm you know, definitely going to also try to learn more about the actual recipes, and that's another chapter that will open up in this research that I plan to continue for many more years. And so here I'm depicting 2 chapters. So I took all of the plants that were mentioned, all the medicinal plants, all the medicinal flowers that were mentioned in chapter 1, and I just superimposed them. So I would draw the first one, and then that was mentioned, and then I would draw the second one, and so I just kept adding them on top of each other. That at the end I ended up with, you know, just a lot of scribbles that I went in and colored in and deciphered and selected which ones I wanted to retain and which ones I just wanted to all color in. So I will have a collection, or I will have created 13 of these type of root floral imagery when I'm done, because there are 13 chapters. And like I said, this is still part of the research that I'm involved in with the codex. Next slide, please. This is again I'm depicting chapter 3 and chapter 5. And as I see, for me, it's a very slow process, because I see the imagery and the imagery that is being created. If you turn these, of course, upside down, you'll realize that they're more like can we go back to the previous slide? You'll notice that they in addition to being very floral, they also began to feel like there's something that can be worn. So I've been actually also thinking of the idea of creating these pieces in different media, such as even textile and metal. So there's a lot of, you know, once you start creating the work, it all starts, you know, communicating, and it's telling me that it also wants to become something else other than just, these are drawings where I'm using, it's drawings on paper with different markers and Sharpies and colored pencils. And they're not very large as well. They're, you know, maybe about 24 inches, but they're not very large. Next slide, please. And so these are again samples of a leaf that as I'm working with, you know, the chisels. Like I said, I've only been working with papel picado since 2018. The type of work that I do is it takes me a little longer. When I see Don Rene Mendoza work and chisel away, he's very quick, and he knows exactly what chisel to use at what moment. And I still take a little time to decide, whether I want, a longer line or a smaller, or what works best. But this is just a sample of a leaf, as I was just trying to create for the upcoming 20 pieces that I will have at the end of the year for this project. Next slide. And so these are the 20 selected flowers that I will be interpreting using the traditional papel picado technique. These are all from different chapters. Like I said, there's 13 chapters, so all of the chapters are represented, and some of them, and for some of the chapters, of course, because I will have 20, I chose 2. But I chose these because either of the movement that I liked, or the amount of flowers, or for the specificity of the illness that they are directed or aimed to cure. And I look forward to actually creating all the work in papel picado, because I know that once I have each piece created in this style, it will lead me to the understanding of another body of work that I know will be a result of, and will be inspired by seeing all of the papel picado imagery of these plants. So I'm really excited. Like I said, this is a project that will continue till the end of December. So I'm at the stage of now knowing exactly which plants I want to work with and translate into this technique. So I will show you the one, so you get an idea what they're going to look like. So the first piece that I wanted to create was this flower. And this flower is actually for the pain in the heart. Some of the recipes might, in this recipe itself, might actually outline many other flowers or plants and other elements, mineral, or even sometimes animal. But for the pain in the heart, this is the only flower that is depicted. And so I decided to, of course, incorporate hearts within my design, so that because it is referencing a way to heal a pain in the heart. And I know that these days we all have a lot of pains in our hearts. So let me just read the text. Let me just actually tell you first, because like I mentioned before, all the names of the plants are in Nahuatl, and then the description of the recipe is for the healing treatment is in Latin. So this is what it says. This is the name of the plant. The name of the plant is, and I don't speak Nahuatl, I wish I did. So if I butcher it, I'm so sorry. The name of the plant is found in folio 28R, and the plant is called Nonochton Azcapanisua, and it is for pain in the heart. The description of the recipe states the following: if one has pain or heat in the heart, the herb Nonochton, which grows near ant hills, hence there's little ants. I don't know if you can see them, but this is, out of all of the illustrations, only 2 incorporate an insect, and this is one of them. So if one has pain or heat in the heart, the herb Nonochton, which grows near ant hills, gold, amber, Teosihuitl, Chichiltic, Tapatli, and Tetlahuitl, with the burnt heart of a stag, are to be ground in water. The juice is to be drunk. So, like I said, the description itself will tell you how to create this potion that you'll have to take. And in this case, they also incorporate the burnt heart of a stag. That's actually another part of my research that I will be working on in a residency that is coming up in January, where I will actually begin to illustrate all of the elements that are being listed in each of the recipes. Next slide, please. And so this is what it looks like. this was my depiction of the Nonochton Azcapanisua. I don't know if it's Azcapanisua or Chua. This is from, again, the only flower that is mentioned for heart pain. And as I'm working through them, as I'm working through the images, I'm going to change the dimensions. Some will be smaller, some will be larger, but this is the idea. So this is the first piece that has been translated into the traditional papel picado technique. Next slide, please. And this is basically, now I'm going to do a little sharing of just things that are happening that are related to the work that I've been either work that is related to the herbs or that I worked in current during the residency at Wake Hill. So these are actually the pieces that you saw in the previous image that were displayed. They were hanging in the ceiling. For this show at Bronx Community College, a beautiful show curated by Andrea Ortuño. I decided to put the paper on the wall just to see what kind of resonance and what kind of reading it would have in the room. And it's actually quite interesting to place all these color tissue papers on a wall, because as you move through the space, the paper still moves with you. So if you get a chance, sorry that I'm plugging this in, but it ends on November 28th. And yes, it's at Bronx Community College. Next slide, please. And coming up as well, of the work I've been working, like I said, with flowers. There is a show that's actually opening this Saturday where they are including the heart that has been created with people that, the community has been creating these different flowers in honor of people who have passed during COVID. And this heart and many other amazing projects will be displayed at Bronx Art Space. And the show is curated by Carrie Clark from The Point. Next slide, please. This is an article by a wonderful, amazing artist. Her name is Ayana Dozier, and she writes about 5 Latin artists using abstraction to address pre-colonial histories. Not because my work is included, but it's a wonderful article to read about what many artists, current contemporary artists, are working on. About our concerns with nature and abstraction, and also the way we visualize the world, that it can be in a very different place if we are attentive, to our histories and to the knowledge of that is there, but we just need to learn and how to access it and bring it forward and share it with others. And in January of 2023, like I mentioned, I feel very fortunate and I feel very honored that I have been invited to do a residency at a beautiful place called Lost and Found Lab in Connecticut, where I will be working on, like I said, giving a life and bringing to fruition all the different elements that are mentioned in each of the prescription of the described recipes in the codex de la Cruz-Badiano. So you will be able to see how to mix what you need to mix exactly to get the result that you need. And lastly, I would like to thank everyone who has actually collaborated with me in this research, and who has guided me and becoming and really understanding more about the codex. There is so far, there are 27 people involved in this project. I did not expect, that I would actually, it's amazing how you enter a space and of inquiry, and you begin to do research and investigate, and you start finding a wealth of people that have all done work with this. I feel very fortunate that I am encountering the people that I am encountering, and there's also a lot of possibilities for collaboration. So this is just, a very small portion of what really is taking place with the finding of the Aztec herbal at the Hispanic Society, and with the fact that I was able to do many things, to travel to Mexico and to buy my own facsimile thanks to the NSCA grant. And I'm very, very thankful to everyone, and I look forward to sharing more of the development of this research.
Thank you, Blanca. That's a wonderful presentation, quite informative. I love the whirlwind experience and all the different things coming together from different places. It's really, it's very intricate, and to think about the works going from the papel picado to another material is really exciting, and I can't wait to see that.
Thank you.
We did a wonderful presentation, but we're running out of time. So, but I did have a few questions, and of course, we might have a question or two from the audience. But very quickly, I just want to give you an opportunity to actually, because you mentioned you were trained as an artist, I mean, as a painter, and I really want to know, you know, your earlier works are also rooted in fiber arts. That you mentioned the work you did from 2000 and early 20th, early part of the century. How does another traditional material like papel picado, how do you make your journey from fiber to papel picado? Or, you know, how do you connect your painter tradition to the fiber to papel picado, and how do you see it? What is the relationship between the media, if there is any, and why did you shift so much?
You know, I feel that it doesn't matter what type of technique I decide to work with. I think that the formal elements that I learned as a trained painter, I apply them to all of them. So whether I'm working with papel picado, with you know, with textiles, with flowers, or with pipe cleaners, the idea of space and composition, all the formal elements that I've learned, you know, throughout my work, I think at the end comes through, even though there are different techniques. I think I tend to also work with the female body, with the body itself, with nature. So if you see all of my work, there's always something that is really linked with the natural world, even though it's, you know, expressed with different media.
Well, that's interesting, because one of the questions I had for you was about, you know, how did you go from the figurative work that you were doing with the fiber arts into this very much abstract part? But you also mentioned, you mentioned in your presentation that there's a rise in interest in the natural world by artists today. And that's an interesting point. But what I wanted to actually go back is more about the artistic or the traditional art techniques that you're using, such as fiber art or papel picado or even textiles, as you mentioned earlier. What are the challenges for an artist who commits themselves to the kind of traditional techniques you're working in, from the getting critical attention in the contemporary art scene? I recognize that for its value.
Well, you know, I mean, one thing people have told me, because I work with papel picado, and it's, you know, it's tissue paper. It's very ephemeral. It's something that's not going to be around for a long time. So when I, you know, and it's something that I have actually had to really think about, of, you know, how do I want to make these type of works more permanent, or more, how do I transfer them to other media, which is something that can be done. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking, let's say, for example, the papel picado. I've created collages, and those collages can be, you know, they can be printed on metal, they can be, you know, on Sintra, on different materials that are more permanent. So yeah, I think more than anything, it has to do with the archival quality of the materials that I work with, you know, which I think for me, it's still very important for me to do them in this ephemeral way, using the ephemeral materials, because there is a certain sensitivity that comes, you know, through these materials that I will not get if I do everything directly on plastic or metal or other things that are much more permanent. I still need to feel that, you know, my skin still needs to feel the tissue paper and see it and see what it does and how it moves.
Well, don't you think there's also been, I've also noticed there's been a rise by artists working more with traditional techniques, or what we used to call decorative arts, you know, people working on vases, ceramics, so forth, and really embracing fiber arts and different techniques to create content-driven work, maybe abstract or not, but content-driven work. And I think that's I guess the question I have is, you know, how do the curators of contemporary art, how are they accepting this, you know, these techniques to be meaningful in the dialogue of contemporary practices?
Well, I mean, they're very meaningful, you know, because I mean, these are techniques that are, you know, they've been around for a long, very long time. And not only embracing the technique, but what the techniques also teach us, you know, as artists. I mean, I've actually, having been working with Don Rene Mendoza, I mean, I go down and they're, you know, they're my friends, they're my family in some way. And so there's a lot of connections and a lot of ways to, it's not something that you just pick up and you leave, you know, it's not a technique that, you know, you go and you learn how to do this and you're done. You're creating relationships. And I think that that's the beautiful thing about traditional techniques, that they come from a lineage of a historical lineage that is passed on through generations and generations. And I feel very fortunate that I'm tapping into something that I didn't have, you know, my family did not do papel picado, but the fact that I am meeting someone that has that lineage is a very different experience. And I know that it's affecting not only my work, but it's affecting me the way I see them, the way I see a wide range of situations when I go down there, you know. So it's making me very aware of many other things that just being here in my studio and doing something here would not make me aware of. So I'm very grateful that I have that direct connection with,
Wow, that's
with his
wonderful.
family.
That's great. That's wonderful. I want to also give some time for the audience. Ryan, do we have any questions from the public?
Yeah, we have a few questions. I think maybe the first one to begin with is, we have a question. How do you see your papel picado creations expanding the healing that the plants do, these medicinal plants, right? So how do you see if I can summarize a little bit, right? How do you see these works as being a kind of extension of that healing aspect?
I think as I continue to develop the work, I'm definitely going, you know, right now, of course, I'm working on the illustrations and just the representation of the plant, but I am going to go deeper into the understanding of the recipe, of the recommendation of the doctor, and see. I'm actually in contact with a chemist in UNAM, and he has been you know, not only him, but a team of scientists are really trying to understand if what the recommendation that is given in the codex is really something valid, something that really works. And so I'm definitely going to continue that, you know, that investigation with him and try to understand how I can represent that in all its complexity, not only the visual and the illustration of the plant, but the actual remedy, and see if we can bring that up to date. And as they are doing it now, to see what, you know, to really learn about this ancestral knowledge that is there, you know, and we have it. And if anything, just the illustrations themselves, I hope that it's a way for people I hope they create awareness of the existence of the codex, and that people become interested, not only in that codex, but in many other codices that exist all over the world that have to do with herbal medicine or medicinal plants.
Perfect. Yeah, I think, you know, what you're saying about your interactions with the chemist goes along with what Francisco is asking. And he's asking about if it was challenging for you to kind of match the pictorial language of the codices with the more like the contemporary knowledge formation as far as like medicine, Western medicine, right? So he's asking about the names, right? So did you have any trouble matching the plants in the codex with how we understand them today, kind of translating between those two knowledges?
Not really, because there's actually a translation. I have these beautiful magazines, these two. This is a special edition of Arqueología de México, and it's actually, it's very difficult to find these days, but in here everything is translated into Spanish. And then I have another, the Aztec Herbal actually has everything in English. But the beauty of this one is that you also get, in the back part of the second part, you have the images of the plants. I don't know if you can see that, but you can see what the plants look like now. And of course, all of the plants are, sadly, thanks to the indigenous population, we are able to save the ones that we have, but we have sadly lost many of them.
Perfect. Yeah. And, I think that, I have a question for you. If you think that what aspects of these codices do you think do you think require the eye of an artist to kind of deduce? Because for the people that created them, these lines between the spiritual and the historic and the artistic and the science were not necessarily as seen as kind of distinct, right? So do you think there's aspects of these manuscripts that you're more able to kind of receive than perhaps your scientist counterparts?
I do think so. I think we have different sensibilities. They're focused on a certain aspect of the codex, whereas I've been spending almost a year just looking at the illustrations, and I'm really focused on the color. Even just the slight variations of color. The scientist is not going to take the time and look at those plants and the roots and say, like, why is that red turning into ochre? Or why is, my sensibility is a very different one than, we're both doing, important work, but I think that what I'm taking from the codex, I still really want to see it up close because of the vibrancy and the tonalities of those colors that are, that are there, because the codex has not been really exposed to the natural, to light or the elements. So they are very pristine, they're very clear. And when I went down to the Museum of Antropología Historia in Mexico City, and I saw those 2 pages, I saw that, the strength of those colors. And there's something about being able to access something that was created during that time, and you see it now, and it's when it's close to you. I don't know how to explain it. It's something very physical that is happening. So yes, I think we are seeing things in a different way, and we will be, a scientist is able to express something, and I will be able to express something based on my understanding of it.
Okay, thank you. And I think I have hopefully one more question. If we can go back to a work from 2019 that you had mentioned earlier. I noticed that you have a quote from Goya, right? And the El sueño de la razón produce monstruos, no? In that papel picado work.
Oh,
and
yes.
I just thought, given that this museum is so affiliated with the work of Goya, for example, that you might want to explain how that quote made it into that work for us.
Well, yes, that you're referring to the piece that where I was doing.
It says the home has wings, I think.
Yes, my home. So I in addition to creating the emblems of the cities that I had lived in, and also some of the dominant buildings or crops, I also incorporated either some it's a line from a song, but that one from Goya was really striking to me just because of the times we were living in. That was 2018, it was during 2018. And there were a lot of things happening in the country, and I felt like that. I really felt that was taking place. So I needed to voice that, and who else to voice that better than Goya?
Perfect. That's it for questions from the audience. Alex?
Alex is there?
Alex, you're on mute.
I was having trouble unmuting myself. Sorry for that. I kept on clicking, it wasn't going. Anyway, I want to first of all thank Ryan. Thank you so much, Ryan, for helping us tonight and for asking the questions by the audience. I really want to thank Blanka for the wonderful presentation, insightful, thoughtful presentation about her work and her actually quite vast and in-depth research she's doing on something that she discovered at the Hispanic Society and it's grown since. and continues to grow. And that's what makes it really wonderful, because it's having lives afterwards and continues to, continue to go. So I want to thank you, Blanka. And again, I want to thank everybody for attending tonight, and invite you for next Thursday when we have Cecile Chung talk about her stop motion animation that she's been creating based on ceramics from the collection of the Hispanic Society, blue and white ceramics from the Hispanic Society. So it's going to be interesting. She's taking ceramics and she's making the stop motion animation. So another interesting way of looking at the collection, a different part of the collection as well. Not the paintings, but the ceramics. So this is really interesting to see how artists are diving into the collection in different ways. It's a vast collection, as we all know who work there, and we are always finding new things ourselves, discovering treasures hidden in the Hispanic Society. So thank you all for attending tonight, and we look forward to seeing you next Thursday. And please share this video, YouTube link to friends who might enjoy the presentation. It is on as well. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Gracias.
Thank
Gracias.
you.
Gracias.
And stop the animation.